Janusz, when we talk about Moises Caicedo of Brighton, we talk about a fantastic football player. Maybe we also forget he's only 21 years old, coming over from Ecuador as a 19-year-old, signing a 4.5-year deal with Brighton, and then they sent him out on loan. And now it looks like Chelsea might be an option for a transfer. Moises Caicedo, your thoughts on a potential fit if he was to go to Chelsea?
Perfect. Once again, you and I today we've been talking about two premier defensive midfielders in the entire Premier League. I mean, there are three, right? I look at Caicedo, I look at Declan Rice, and I look at, of course, Rodri. We didn't talk about Rodri, but just as Declan Rice is a perfect fit for Arsenal, you look at Caicedo, and no wonder that top teams were looking for him, right? So yeah, you've mentioned 4.5 million. Now they're looking to sell him for 80. 21 years old, so durable, right? He's only missed one match this season. Think about that, right? That's very, very important. And so when you look at a fit, at Brighton, he played, in that pivot role with McAllister, and allowed McAllister to be himself. Now, just imagine now, talking about a perfect fit, if you plug him into that Chelsea midfield alongside Enzo Fernandez. And by the way, which would open up Enzo Fernandez to actually be himself and be even better than he was. Because Enzo Fernandez, he's not a holding midfielder. Yes, we've seen him play that, although I don't think in the World Cup in Qatar he started in that position, moved over, right? But if you play in 3 or 4, he's, think of him at Benfica and why he became such a big player at such a young age, Enzo. He was playing alongside Florentino off the left side, coming inside, going forward, because that's what drives him. He doesn't want to be holding there. He wants the ability to play and open up a little bit, just like McAllister did alongside of him. So I look at that partnership that opens up so many possibilities between Caicedo and Enzo Fernandez. So it just makes all kinds of sense. And obviously that's probably not news, because look how many teams are fighting for him.
What do you think Pochettino will do as far as a formation is concerned if he does get Caicedo and then he has that extra protection in front of a back three or a back four with the players that he's kind of got right now and looking to get, as well as the ones that are already going to be on their way? What formation do you think Pochettino might be looking at for Chelsea next season?
Again, it'll be variation, right? 4-2-3-1, 4-3-3. And again, it goes to opponent. That's why Caicedo gives him so many options. I don't even want to mention the fact that he played right back towards the end of the season out of necessity, but just the fact that, I think he knows he can, gives you something extra. Maybe you pay a couple $1 million more for that. But obviously, he's not going to be playing there at all, maybe in emergency. But again, if Chelsea having so many wingers, 4-2-3-1 would make sense. Now you have that double pivot where Caicedo is going to just control things. It's just a superb player. If you look at, I think, I looked at some of the stats here, and only Palhinha at Fulham had more tackles. He was second to that. Declan Rice, I believe, just made more interceptions, so he was second to that. And I think he was second to Rodri in winning the ball and starting the counter, because that's the beauty of Caicedo, which I get in a second. Started the counter that ended in a shot, because I think we think of Caicedo in a sense that is that holding midfielder, but he can be, and very often is, box to box. This is a player that covers a lot of ground. This is what's incredible for him. So with Pochettino, that is so important, right? So that pivot can interchange, because as we know, Pochettino likes to press very, very high, and winning the ball. The moment you lose it, it's so important to Pochettino as well. And he's one of the best in that department. As I've mentioned, Rice, Caicedo, and Rodri pick themselves in that situation. So the attraction here is incredible, and I can understand why.
That will have been Brighton losing both Caicedo if he does go to Chelsea or whatever, and McAllister, who's joined Liverpool. But no one would be surprised if they pulled another rabbit out of the hat and found someone that very few people have heard of that goes on to make them an absolute fortune in years to come. This is a kid, Caicedo, who they brought over as a 19-year-old, and they then sent him on loan to Belgium, and he got more experience there. But they knew what they were getting, and they worked hard to get this. Is there anything stopping other clubs in the Premier League from emulating what Brighton do and maybe looking at the untapped market or the emerging markets in world football? Or do the top clubs simply not have the patience to do that?
Well, yeah, it's patient. I mean, patience is a good word, right? Because they're expected to do, to win things right away. So it's very difficult to take a chance on a player like that, right? I mean, we all talk about Brighton, how wonderful they are. They are because they can afford it. This is the formula that they will continue to have. That's not going to end. It's not going to end with De Zerbi. I'm sure they're already probably in their heads thinking of a next manager that's willing and has the know-how in terms of how to develop players. I think the bigger question is, it's almost not. I mean, it's great that clubs like Brighton, Brentford, in a way, finds players like that. The smaller clubs will have to do that. It's not that they have the ability to find these diamonds. I also think that it's important for young players to know how to get to the top level, that it doesn't have to be immediately, right? There's, of course, an attraction when you're 17, 18, or 19 to be bought by a big club. And when you're 18 or 19, you think, I know how it is, you think that you actually can play right away in that club, right? So I think, it's important to make sure that you have people around you that understand how to get you to that level, being alone or maybe signing for a smaller club, and make sure you continue to develop, make sure that you continue to get playing time, because that's what's more, you can't develop if you're not playing. And that's what's very often happens to players that immediately go to these clubs, maybe are not loaned out because of the fault of the club, or maybe they insist on staying around because they want to fight for their spot. So I think, the simple answer to that is that you have clubs in the middle of the, Premier League and the bottom that simply have to go that way, where the big clubs can afford to do it and don't have the patience, as you've mentioned.
I was just having a look at some of the players that Brighton have. Yes, they're going to do really well financially if they sell some of the talent that they have, but look at the impact that Enciso had when he came into the team near the end of the season. Evan Ferguson as well, the youngsters. I mean, they've got Steven Alzati, the Colombian midfielder, Denis Undav, who we might see more of coming forward in this season to come. They've got a lot of players, Sarmiento as well, the Ecuadorian. So it's like this conveyor belt. It's like Ajax of old, whether or not it's at that level yet. But this is the blueprint over what teams like Brighton, you mentioned Brentford, should do. It's not going to work all the time, but if it doesn't, you only need one to work to get you 80 million. And that's
look at Cucurella, right? I mean, exactly. The book is not closed, but it didn't pan out yet the way I think people envision, at least at Chelsea. I mean, it's not perfect science, Mark. I mean, sometimes you see the talent, but I think you have to be strategic. And I think the clubs that are buying, have to buy a player, not to develop them more because they've been developed, say, at Brighton already, but know that there's a specific need for that type of player, and that player is going to get the trust of the manager, right? There's not going to be an expectation of right away being the best, but kind of saying, yes, you're going to get plenty of playing time, because in my view, even though you're young, you already have what I need as a manager and what this team needs. You mentioned Brighton, Jakub Mulder is another player, Polish international, who's missed the entire season. I mean, he was already before the injury one of the key players. Let's hope that he develops as well, because as you've mentioned, they're losing two central players in McAllister and Caicedo. So hopefully he's going to be the one that can kind of return and continue to develop. So yes, I think if you look at Brighton, there's so many. I mean, I don't even know if you mentioned Mitoma. In that.
No, he's already seen as a kind of mainstay in the side.
Right. So yes, I mean, now it's a question of, the bigger teams identifying, keep an eye on these players and say, okay, if we go for them, does it make sense? Because if they go for them, I think they're ready to step into the lineup. You're not going to spend $60-70 million on these players, even though they're young, to think, well, we're going to continue to develop them. Because as we just mentioned, they really don't have time. Those players have to step in and deliver.
Final question would have to be about Chelsea. They were the ones that have been linked with Caicedo. Nkunku's already in. If they get Caicedo, how many other pieces of a jigsaw does Pochettino need to fill before you think, I'm pretty happy with that?
Yeah, I think it's quite a lot because so much is dependent on players that they need to offload.
Certainly.
And by the sounds of it, I'm not even talking about players that have been loaned out or maybe playing abroad in one of their satellite clubs. I mean, there's still so many question marks, right? For Pochettino to come in, just look how much previous managers have, the Lampard or Potter, or Tuchel have struggled with that big squad. So I think that Pochettino obviously has an idea. He better have an idea of what to do. But I think he's just now waiting on the players that are going to be offloaded, because then I think they'll be able to pull the trigger on the players that he truly wants. So it's a